The problem with well-fought close losses against good teams is that, well, they're still losses like any other. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Kraken finish out the homestand with another close loss, 3-2 this time to the New Jersey Devils, another one of the NHL's best teams. So the Kraken go toe-to-toe against two of the NHL's best in the Oilers and Devils, give both teams as much as they can handle, and in both cases are nearly able to at least force overtime to get a point and have a chance to win it at 3-on-3. I mean, I would say the shootout too, but we all know that's a little bit far-fetched. Still, the Kraken come up one short in this one, just like they did against the Oilers, not counting the empty netter at the end of that one. And at this point in the season, and I know that it might seem ridiculous to even bring it up, but if the Kraken want any chance at the playoffs, now they really do have to go on quite a bit of a run. We're talking something like what they did around this time last year with that 9-game winning streak, something like winning 9 of 12. It doesn't have to be all in a row, though that would certainly help. But the Kraken are definitely in a pretty deep hole now, having lost these last two, even with them being against good teams. Unfortunately, this is just kind of the place you put yourself in when you give up points in the standings against teams like the Sharks and Ducks, who are now ahead of you in the standings, by the way, and Blackhawks, that when you have these close losses and get goalied like the Kraken do in this one, well, you just can't afford to do that because of the ones that you gave away early. And not to start on too much of a negative note, but just in case the ever-slimming odds of the Kraken having any chance at a postseason this year wasn't bad enough, we also got more bad news that both Decord and Gord headed to the IR before this game. Now, at least both of those are set retroactively to when the each respectively last played, so for Gord that still means he'll miss a while, with having only missed now the 2 games, having been a late scratch before the game against the Oilers. For Decord, though, it does mean he could still come back relatively soon, having missed the minimum required to have a stint on the IR, since he hasn't played since the last game before the Christmas break. I think the Kraken's still hoping that he can come back maybe towards the end of this road trip. It would be great if he could be back for the second half of the back-to-back. Otherwise, we'll be seeing Steska for the first time in the NHL. But either way, it means the Kraken continue to lose players from their roster when they need to be gaining points in the standings, which gets harder to do the more players end up getting injured. Either way, going into this game, the roster, lines, everything looks the same as it did against the Oilers. And similarly to that game, the Kraken once again come off looking pretty flat. The first 5-10 minutes of this game is all Devils, and they make it count fairly early on. Not quite as early as the Oilers, but once again, it's a defensive blunder from the Kraken, as they first of all turn over the puck in their own end of the ice. It's Chandler Stevenson who tries to rim it up along the boards. With 2 Devils there, it never has a chance. So Timo Meier ends up with it and quickly gets it out to the slot for a one-time shot for Hischier, which that save is made by Grubauer. He made a number, including this one, grade A saves over the course of this game. Again, fantastic for the Kraken and bailing them out on a number of occasions. Unfortunately, on this occasion, his rebound finds another guy completely lost in the defense. This time, it's Dawson Mercer, who's coming in off of a change, streaking down the far side of the offensive end, completely unseen by any Kraken player until it's too late. He gets right up next to Grubauer, picks up that rebound, and just wraps it around his toe and into the side of the net without anything Grubauer can really do about it, and without anybody defensively helping him to pick up that player on his way in. And then for at least a couple more minutes, Grubauer would continue to have to work pretty hard, making a number of saves, as the Kraken are getting significantly outshot through the first 10 minutes. I think by the 10-minute mark, they only had one, maybe they'd just gotten their second shot on net, but are getting outshot something like 7, 8, 9 to 1 or 2. So just a horrendous start to this game, and it looked like the way things were going that the Devils might be able to just run the Kraken out of the rink, or at least put them in enough of a hole like the Oilers did that the Kraken are unable to climb out of it with however much time they give themselves when eventually they wake up into this game. Fortunately, though, about the halfway point of the period, the Kraken do wake up, and they wake up in a big way as they turn this game right around 180. All the pressure for the back half of the first period is down towards the Devils' end of the net. The Kraken, by the end of the period, outshooting the Devils 13-10, I think it was, significantly outshooting them in the back half. The Devils 3 shots to something like 12 or 11 for the Kraken. And most importantly, about halfway through the back half, so around the 15-minute mark or a little bit past that of the first period, the Kraken are even able to make it count on the scoreboard. It's not a shot that really has any business going into the net by itself. It's a Larson shot from well out towards the top of the faceoff circle on the far side, so not a dangerous shot by any means. But what allows it to get past Markstrom, who, as we'll find out, was absolutely on one tonight, is a very nice screen from one of his old teammates in Jared McCann, having both played in Vancouver for a little bit together. McCann screening Markstrom, he never sees the shot come off. It hits the far side top corner of the net, giving Larson his second of the season and tying the game for the Kraken, which they'll be able to even keep the momentum, but keep the game tied going into the first intermission. And in the interest of fairness, I gotta say, while we're here, credit where it's due, this line, well, it has recently been pretty easily, I'd say, the worst of the four lines for the Kraken. It was the one that was on the ice, and well, Chandler Stevenson, who gets the primary assist on this goal, also kind of helped the Devils with their first one. They are the ones that make this happen and at least make up for what they did defensively to allow the Devils to get that lead by making up for it, with Stevenson passing it to Larson, and then McCann with the screen that, quite frankly, the Kraken could use seeing quite a lot more of. This line in particular could use a lot more of that, as none of them have really shown a tendency to go towards the net, so what do you know? As soon as McCann does, it ends up making a difference. Anyways, we head to the second period. Really not much of anything happens for the majority of the second period. It's a period that, at least for me, it seemed like it just flew by up until the last couple minutes of it. I don't think there was a shot on goal for the first 4 or 5 minutes of the period either way. And then eventually, once we get into the last few minutes, the Devils start to get a bit of a press again. Grubauer a couple more big saves as we get into the last couple minutes. But then with just under 30 seconds left, as it looks like we're just going to have an uneventful end to the period, we'll go to the locker rooms and settle things in the third. A puck that's just thrown in deep into the Kraken end bounds off the boards right to a Devil who's the first one in by quite some margin. So while the shot that he flubs that just kind of slides through Grubauer and goes in is a pretty soft goal for Grubauer to allow. Now, obviously, nobody was expecting him to flub the shot. It just kind of goes off the heel of his stick. Grubauer's getting ready to seal off the post as he expects the shot to be either trying to wrap around his toe or get a little bit more of a shot off at the pad. Instead, it just kind of slides right through the 5-hole into the net. A bit of a fluky one. Regardless of what you think about how soft of a goal this is for Grubauer to allow, again, there's just no excuse for the Kraken defensively to allow a guy that completely wide open with that much time to go pick up that puck and have the time in front of the net that he needs to score, even if it doesn't necessarily happen the way that he probably would have planned it to. But regardless of who's to blame for this, who you decide you want to put it on, all that really matters is that now in 24 seconds, the Kraken are once again going to go to a third period, down at least a goal, rather than, for once, at least going into the third with an even chance to win. Obviously, would have been nice if they had a lead, but giving up a goal in the last few seconds certainly helps nothing, and if anything, could give the Devils momentum to start out the third. Although at least that part of it is going to be a lot harder for them to do while they're on the penalty kill, which is exactly how they're going to start out the third period, as with 7 seconds left, the Kraken get a puck deep into the Devils' end. Schwartz goes to chase after it, and then he gets cross-checked in the back, headfirst into the boards. This could easily have been called boarding. It ends up getting called cross-checking, but it also leads to all sorts of extracurriculars and fisticuffs between players. There's a lot of dropped gloves. Eventually, the guys that get credited for a fight are Montour and Pesce, I think it was. Both of them end up on the ice. Pesce takes Montour to the ice, then Montour flips it on Pesce and kind of slams him to the ice a little bit. In the end, the officials decide to give the one penalty for the cross-check and then traded fighting penalties for Montour and Pesce. So having just given up the lead, the Kraken are going to get a power play for the last 7 seconds of the second, but barring a franchise record quick goal, that it probably isn't going to go anywhere. But it will mean that they get a power play to start out the third, which, as it turns out, is all that they would need to even things back up, as late in the power play, the second unit out on the ice, well, I say second unit, who knows what unit is what. They released the second unit that went out on this power play anyway, and with just seconds left in the power play, the Kraken, who are clearly trying to feed McCann to skate downhill and fire off a shot from his spot, he's really not given that space, so eventually he just decides to pass the puck down below the net where Kaapo Kakko is waiting. After handling it a couple of times, he just kind of lifts a little saucer pass out into the slot where Shane Wright is waiting, and he just picks it off the ice and lifts it into the top of the net, far side corner, giving Markstrom no chance whatsoever. The Kraken with the power play goal on the only power play either way for either team in this game. They have evened things up back at 2 to start out the third. Wright, it's his 8th of the season, with quite a number of those having come on the power play. Kakko picks up his 4th assist with the Kraken already, continuing to at least get points even if the goals haven't quite been there, though he is getting his chances and they'll eventually start going. And McCann picks up his 16th of the season. Again, scoring has not been coming easy for him or really anybody on that line, even with Stevenson now on a 3-game point streak. But at least he picks up a point here on the power play after having gotten a honorary assist with that screen for Larson earlier on, so overall a decent game offensively for McCann anyway. Unfortunately, however, once again a tale as old as time, the Kraken give up a quick response back the other way. The tie game does not last very long. It's less than a minute before the Devils are right down the ice the other way, and defensive issues continue for the Kraken as the Devils get into the offensive end as they're still finishing up the announcement of the goal for Wright. The puck is passed through a number of Kraken players right out into the slot where, just like Wright had scored on the slot on the power play, it's Palat waiting with a little bit too much time and space, but all he needs is the one moment with a clean shot to fire off that puck. It gives Grubauer no chance whatsoever. He throws his glove at it, but it doesn't get to the corner where the puck is perfectly placed by Palat to give the Devils right back the lead. And for the Kraken, it kind of has to be said that it's some usual suspects here from these last couple of games. Once again, you've got Stevenson out there that allows the play to get past him. Not really. He's not supposed to be on the first guy through, but as a center, you're a little bit more responsible defensively, or you're supposed to be anyway. Meanwhile, with all 3 of these goals, while neither one of them were out for all 3 of them, at least one of the 2 of Larson and Dunn were out for all 3 goals against. And this is one where I kind of feel like Larson has to be a little bit up tighter on Palat as he gets this shot off, at least putting a stick in front of it, but he's not even close enough to do that. And after having had one of their worst games ever as a pairing for the Kraken in the last game against the Oilers, it continues to be a tough stretch defensively for the top pair of the Kraken. Now, although we've already reached the final score that you saw in the beginning here early on in the third, the fireworks were far from over in this game as the third period, unlike the second, was a wildly entertaining third period. Great chance after even better chance up and down the ice all period long. Spectacular plays being made and even better goaltending at both ends of the ice. Great saves, highlight reel saves, and from one end of the ice, a couple save of the year candidates. Grubauer was fantastic for the Kraken all game long, save for maybe that one right at the end of the second. But he, like I said earlier on, bailed the Kraken out on a number of occasions. At the other end of the ice, though, you gotta tip your cap to Markstrom, who came up with 2 of the best saves that we've seen all season long in a Kraken game, for sure, regardless of which goaltender, and maybe 2 of the best saves of the NHL season so far in this one period. The first one actually doesn't come that long after the Devils retake the lead after the Kraken power play goal. It's another great rush chance for not the entirety of the right line, as it's Kaapo Kakko who starts it. On the rush, gets down into the offensive end, stops up right in the corner, and passes it clean across to the far side, where Shane Wright is streaking in. Wright gets down to the low faceoff circle, and then fires off a pass to the far side, where waiting all alone on the back door with just a little tap-in necessary is Eeli Tolvanen. He gets his stick on it, but diving back and getting his glove just in time in front of Tolvanen's shot is Markstrom with an absolutely incredible save. It cost the Kraken potentially at least a point in the standings, but it is one of the better saves you're going to see all season long. I mean, you know, it's a particularly good save when the guy who made the shot just stands there for a few seconds staring at the net in disbelief that the puck isn't in it. Eventually, Tolvanen skates away the second time on the night that he leaves a little bit disappointed, as that full line with Bjorkstrand included had a rush chance in the first period, a 3-on-1, or kind of a broken 3-on-1. They at least turned it into what looked like a 3-on-1. Passing it around, eventually it was Bjorkstrand who fired off the shot, and well, if I was nitpicking, I'd have to say Bjorkstrand probably could have placed the shot a little bit better. It required another pretty spectacular save in the first period from Markstrom, which we thought would be maybe the highlight save of the game until this one, and then Grubauer answers with a almost as good toe save back the other way on a cross-seam pass and some more questionable defense from the Kraken. And then as we get towards the end, or at least into the back half of the third period, the Kraken are going to get one more, at least, grade A look and a puck that really has no business not going into the net. As Kakko gets it to the front for Beniers, the rebound goes off. It is a shot on goal for Kakko. The rebound comes right out to Beniers, who's the first one to the net. So the Kraken getting to the net, which is nice to see. We saw the McCann screen early on and some other chances in and around, obviously right in front on that power play goal. But Beniers gets to that rebound first and is able to chip it over the pad of Markstrom as he's kind of falling backwards to the ice. With the puck fluttering in the air, Markstrom is able, from his back, to get the paddle of his stick. The broadcast, I think they gave him credit for the toe of his stick getting the save, but really it's more the inside kind of the armpit, the inside of the bend of the stick. Either way, it's a spectacular paddle save as he's falling backwards, getting just enough of it to keep it out of the net. I will say the overhead view made it look like this puck might have been headed towards the post and may have stayed out anyway. Either way, Markstrom doesn't take the chance, makes another spectacular sprawling save that, yeah, you're probably not going to see another one quite that good for quite a while. And the Kraken just cannot find any matter of luck, any little bit of extra bounce to go their way to find the back of the net. Eventually, they do pull Grubauer. It takes quite a while. The Devils do a good job of keeping the Kraken in their end, or at least not giving the Kraken clean control through the neutral zone, so they aren't able to get Grubauer pulled until about 2 minutes left, which is a little bit later than I think they ideally would like to do it. The Kraken don't give up the empty netter, but also don't really get that close to tying it with the extra skater out on the ice. So eventually we do get to that final score of 3-2. So again, overall with this game for the Kraken, it is a really well fought, great, exciting, certainly third period. You ended the game with the best period from an entertainment standpoint anyway. Generally, though, the Kraken go toe-to-toe with one of the NHL's better teams, even if they'd been a little bit slumping of late. This is a very talented Devils team that likes to play that north and south, exciting, fast-paced game that the Kraken also like to play. We saw these two teams play a pretty entertaining, close, I think also 3-2 game just a few weeks ago in December before the break. But again, even with close games against good teams in the Oilers and Devils, because of those games that you gave up earlier on in the season, you still now find yourself 4 games below NHL 500, where if they just taken care of business in those 4 games, heck, never mind at NHL 500, they'd only have had to win 2 of those games they should have won to be at NHL 500. They could easily, even with these 2 losses, be 4 games above it, and in that playoff race if they'd just taken care of business earlier on in the season. But because they couldn't do that in those 4 games, now they're in a spot where these close losses, even against good teams, are ones they just can't really afford to have. And then there's also the discussion that we've already had a number of times, at least once or twice in pretty much every game here over this last stretch, going all the way to back before the break on that road trip where it included one of those losses to the Blackhawks, where the Kraken, whether it's for an entire period or 5 to 10 minutes at a time, will just inexplicably completely forget how to play defense, lose guys they have no business losing, letting players get past all 5 skaters on the ice. Again, that's the case with 2 of the goals in this game. The first one where they just lose Mercer or just don't see him coming onto the ice and into the offensive end. He gets one-on-one with Grubauer to pick up that rebound with no Kraken player anywhere really near him. And then the second goal, yeah, it's a soft one for Grubauer to allow, but for a second time, you've allowed a Devils player all the time he could possibly want, being the first one in by a wide margin to that puck. And it's one thing to let an opposing player be the first one in on the forecheck if you're right there with them to challenge them, get a body on them, and not allow them to cleanly handle the puck. But the Kraken are just allowing opposing players to be the first ones in with plenty of time, with a stride or 2 beating the next Kraken player to them. And then with the third goal, I mean, if it was at any other point in the game, I think you could kind of chalk that one up to just the Devils being a really good team offensively. They like to score on the rush, create plays with these quick entrances into the offensive end, and it is just a nice play from them. They get a good pass through some crowd, and with a little bit of space there created in the slot, get that shot off, and it's perfectly placed. But because of when it happens right after the Kraken just tied it and the history this team has with giving up these quick response goals, I mean, it's at the point where if you're at a game or heck, even just watching it on TV, when the Kraken score a goal, I don't feel like there's a time where at least I feel more nervous as a Kraken fan than the minute and a half to 2 minutes following when they score a meaningful either game tying or lead taking goal late in a game. Which obviously going forward are all things the Kraken are going to have to clear up and clear up consistently, if not entirely, if they're going to go on the run that they need to have any chance of getting back into this playoff race, which right now, quite frankly, they're not in. They need to have a good long run of wins, winning at least 2/3, if not 3/4 of their games for a significant period of time here if they want to get even back into the race. Which, as far as it's concerned, well, saying the schedule is lined up for them before has not meant that they play like the schedule is lined up for them, but the schedule is lined up for them as they go off on this road trip to potentially start one of those runs against the next 4 teams to start out the first 4 games of this road trip, all being quite beatable teams. You've got the Blue Jackets, who are playing pretty well. This is not the Blue Jackets, even in spite of all the adversity that has happened around that team over the last quite a while now. It's still a team that can be dangerous. Then you get back-to-back daytime games over the weekend against the Sabres and Red Wings, 2 teams that, kind of like the Kraken, while they had to go through a rebuild versus an expansion draft, are also teams that would really like to be a little bit farther along the process of getting back into playoff contention than where they are right now. So, like the Kraken, I mean, their team's in a similar spot to where the Kraken are right now, which does make them quite beatable, as we've obviously seen. And then you get a Penguins team that has been all over the place this season, and is also a team the Kraken have had generally pretty good success against in their history. Of course, then you do finish off the road trip against a pretty good Jets team in Winnipeg, though it is a team that you took to overtime in the one meeting so far, so obviously you can play well against them. They'll just need to do it, and if they go into that game at NHL 500 after having taken care of business in the first 4 games, then you're in a decent spot where a loss there or maybe 1 point in the standings isn't the end of the world, and you can try to get above NHL 500 and start picking up some games on the north end of that as you get into the rest of the month. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens over these next 5 games, if the Kraken can get back to NHL 500, and then from there try to work things forward. For now, though, let's finish this one out with the Kraken 3 stars, as always brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you want to help decide Kraken 3 stars after every game, you can help support this channel like the patrons over there are doing a fantastic job of by going to the link down below and supporting a little bit more than you already are by watching to this point. With the first star, I got to give it again to Philip Grubauer. He played another fantastic game, made some very nice saves, and he is just playing great in net for the Kraken here in Decord's absence, really giving them a chance to win every game. Whether or not the team actually gives themselves a chance in front of him, that's been a different issue. But Grubauer has been fantastic, and if he can keep this up once Decord gets healthy, then the Kraken are at least going to be given a chance in just about every game they play down the stretch, and then it's just down to playing consistent 5-on-5 hockey in front of that goaltending. But the second star, not to sound like a broken record here, because I feel like his name has been coming up a lot in these stars since he joined the team, but it's got to be Kaapo Kakko for me again. I mean, you could go in with him, or Beniers, I think, is the second star, and I'm going to give Beniers the third, so again, that line just easily the best line for the Kraken here over this last stretch of games. Unfortunately, the other 3 lines haven't been quite consistent enough to back up how well that line's been playing. The right line had a good game in this one, and the fourth line had its moments, which is kind of what you need from a fourth line. You don't need too much more than that. They weren't bad defensively, and they at least were tenacious getting into the offensive end. But this top line with Beniers and Kakko particularly, and then Schwartz doing his thing as an addition to it, has been really the driving force for the Kraken offense for the last, since we came back from the break. And I suppose at the very least, regardless of what happens over the rest of the season, that is a bright spot that we can look at going into the future, that assuming they keep Kakko around, this could be the start of something with these 2 guys both being pretty young, could be with the team for a while. If they start meshing and continue to play the way that they have so far early on, the more that they get to know each other, this could be the winger that Beniers has been looking for that really helps the offensive part of his game get going a little bit more consistently, gives him someone to play off of, a bigger body that can get in on the forecheck so Beniers doesn't have to do quite as much of that puck play along the boards, and then can just do the transition stuff, get it into the offensive end, and then put himself in the areas he needs to help finish plays. Other than that, again, like I said, the right line was pretty good, had a couple of grade A opportunities. Really, two that should have ended up in the back of the net just came up empty because of spectacular saves from Markstrom. McCann had a pretty good night. And then defensively, it was a bit of a mess. I mean, you'd love to say that Larson had a good night because he got his second goal of the season, but frankly, defensively, he and Dunn have been quite the opposite of what we've been used to over the course of them as a pair. But as always, though, I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comment section below, who your 3 stars would be, how we're feeling going into this road trip, where at least there's winnable games for the Kraken. Not that they've made these last couple games against better teams not look winnable, but these are games that if the Kraken want to get back into things, these are points that they can't afford to lose. Until then, though, on Thursday, the start of the road trip, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.